Hi everyone, I'm Isabelle Knight. I'm a PR specialist and a publicist, a former high-level publicist of 20 years working in film and TV as well as with books and brands. I've worked with names like J.K. Rowling and the BBC. I now help authors, self-published, indie published, and small press published authors to build their brands, learn how to get their books out into the world, where to find their readers, and to understand ways that they can maximize the impact and success of their books by building their author brands. To tell you a little bit about me, I began my career way back when in music. I promoted the London Jazz Festival back in the early 2000s and promoted lots of gigs around the city. From there, I went into film and TV, where I worked for almost 20 years in that industry, working with great big brands, everything from big blockbuster movies to small independent movies. And then I went into TV in the latter stage of my career as a publicist, and notably worked on the TV adaptations of J.K. Rowling's Strike series, the detective Strike books that were adapted for BBC. So I've worked on very large projects, small projects, and everything in between. Following the work on the J.K. Rowling projects and other TV work, I got into understanding that authors who are not traditionally published were struggling to get their books out there and for their books to find their readers. So, with all of my experience working on brands and on big global campaigns for both big brands and small brands, I realized that I could really help authors who don't have access to all of the tools and resources that brands have when they're working with professional PRs, professional marketers. So I'm coming from a fully entertainment and arts background, which has encompassed film, TV, books, creative brands. And I started working with business owners and business founders, mainly female founders, coming from a really male-dominated industry like film and TV. The further I got into that world, the more important it became to me to champion the work that women in particular were doing. And having worked with huge names, obviously like J.K. Rowling, I then began to look at female founders. And often the thing with business owners is that they weren't writing books or wanted to write books to accompany their business. And I understood that people who wanted to promote their business also then had to apply the same principles to promoting their books. And my light bulb moment was recognizing that, I've come from an entertainment, arts, culture, and books background, with books always being my first love. So to help people to promote their books in this specific way was a skill set that I could absolutely help them with. And that has evolved from not just working with non-fiction authors, as it started out, ironically, but now I also work with many, many fiction authors. So I've almost done a full circle coming back to the kind of core arts and culture that I really love and that really lights me up. It can be very challenging for new authors to get their first break and continue to be seen and stay seen. So, this is one of the major challenges that I work with authors on. And I think when self published, indie published, or even traditionally published authors publish with small presses, what they do get a lot of help with is writing the book and bringing the book to fruition and going through that publishing process. But I think what often gets missed, and I would argue is the next most important part of the process after actually writing the book, is the promotion of it. Thinking about who the reader is, who is the reader going to be? Where are you going to find that reader? And what are you going to say about your book to compel those potential readers to actually pick it up and buy it, thereby creating a readership and leading to more sales? Most of the time, as authors begin by writing a book because it's what they love, it's their passion. They've had a great idea for a book. But ultimately, most authors do want other people to read their books. And a lot of authors find themselves getting to the point of publication and not having given enough thought to who is going to read their book, why that person might read it, and how are they going to get that person to read the book. So, my mission, what I'm doing, is really helping people to think about that process of how will you get readers to read your book as early as possible in your publishing journey, in your writing journey, to make things much easier for yourself as you get to the point of having a finished book ready to promote. Now, I call this building your author brand. And the foundations of this are creating your author brand story. But what that means is it's essentially giving authors the confidence to know how to talk about themselves as an author, stepping into who you are as an author and believing in yourself as an author. Often that's a really big first step of your journey, is moving from being somebody who's written a book to being an author and someone who has a growing readership. And it's that mindset shift moving from the first to the second that is often really key in the way an author shows up and presents themselves. So, what does building an author brand story actually mean? So, from my PR and publicity background, ultimately, I'm always looking at, if I were to put an author in front of a journalist, the first question they would have, the journalist, is why should we care that you have written this book? And they might not couch it in those terms, but that's essentially what the first question is getting at. So fundamentally, we want to answer that. Authors write books all the time. People publish books all the time. So, what we want to know is, why do we as readers particularly care about you and the particular book you have written as an author? So, what I'm doing with the brand story is helping authors to answer that question. It's not enough to say, I've written a book and this is what it's about. That's all great. And people might be interested on a surface level, but it's not going to get you to the point of having articles written about you. It's not going to get you to the point of quickly growing readerships and, importantly, putting you ahead of all the other authors who've written books within your genre and within your market, and even written books on your topics and subjects. With the author brand story, what we essentially want to do is to show readers how to understand why you as an author have particularly written this book. What makes you the person to have written it? Why would you write in the genre you've written? Why would you write the book with the plot, the characters, the subject that you've written, or in the particular topic area if it's nonfiction? What's the message that you want to give your readers? Whether you write fiction or nonfiction, we all have to work on our brand story. We want to find the compelling reason that a reader would pick up your particular book. What we're not doing with the author's story is giving everybody every personal detail about our lives. That's not what this is about. It's not like being on social media and revealing everything about your life that we see. We see people on social media doing that all the time. But rather, it's about curating that story and showing your potential readers your interests, your motivations, your passions, and the particular reason you've written this book. Then we're drawing people in with that story. So when the potential reader hears that story, it's hooking them in and it's compelling them to actually pick up the book and read it. I often use the example of the J.K. Rowling brand story, which is so well known now that we don't even think of it as such. So, with the Harry Potter series, it was very much a rags to riches story behind the creation of those books, which is a classic story that we know is popular and compelling and often will sell a product, a book, a service, whatever it is. And within that story was the story of a woman who was struggling to feed her family and created a fantasy world of a boy wizard to get away from the harsh realities of life. When J.K. Rowling came to write the Strike Detective series, which is less known than the Harry Potter series, but still very popular and popular enough to be made into a TV show, when she came to write the Strike series, she wrote under a different name, a man's name, Robert Galbraith. Her reasoning behind that was to get away from the popularity of Harry Potter and to be seen as an author writing fiction for adults and to not have the previous story overshadow the new one, so becoming a new authorial persona, in a sense to become incognito. But all of these things help to create the author brand story, the story behind the books. And it's already starting to compel us and to pique our interest before we've even picked up the book. Of course, not everyone is a huge name like J.K. Rowling. So this is about finding what is your own individual author brand story, the thing that is going to make us care about why you wrote your book and make us care enough for us to go and pick it up, read it, buy it. And it's finding that emotional connection in the author's brand story that is going to resonate with the potential reader and tells us something about you, but also shows people something about themselves that they can then relate to in your story as well. So, when you're creating an author brand story and thinking about what kinds of things need to go into it and what sort of stages there are in creating your author story, we almost have to leave to one side to begin with the thinking that you're writing a marketing piece or a PR piece. I often say to people, tell your story out loud, tell it to the cat, tell it to the wall, speak it into your phone, record yourself saying it. The first version of your author story doesn't need to be shared with anyone. But start by asking yourself, what brought me to the point where I've written this book, or I've got this idea for a book that I want to write, and walk yourself through all the steps that brought you to that point. Some questions that I often give my authors to think about is why you, why here, why now? The three simple questions that are actually quite difficult to answer when you get into it. But those three questions can help you to start to look at what are the motivations and the patterns that come up again and again in your personal story, in your author story. Those are the things that drive you and that keep driving you at every step. So when you're creating your author story, it's about looking at what are the things that motivate you. What are the passions and what are the examples that you can use to show that, to illustrate that? Once we've uncovered these things or we've pulled them out of your overall story, then we can start to craft that into something concise and something that we can begin to use as a marketing piece. It's definitely about being genuine and being authentic. And to do that, we do have to dig a little bit emotionally. So there is a vulnerability piece to this as well. Absolutely. To be able to say, well, this is who I am, this is what really motivates me, this is what I'm passionate about. It's not about telling everyone every personal detail of your life. And this is something that I very much stress to the authors that work with me. But what we do want to do is choose which examples and illustrations you're going to use to show, to demonstrate your values, the values that lie in what motivates you as an author. These then feed into all of your marketing, your PR activity, your social media, your content creation, and any of the ways that you decide to promote yourself as an author and sell your books. This author story piece will also help you with pitching to agents, pitching to any retailers, pitching to any publishers in the future. And all those have to come from a place of knowing how to present yourself and how to talk about yourself as an author. And that helps you to then understand where you're going to fit in the market, where you're going to fit in the genre, and who are your ideal readers going to be. Once we've figured out these things, everything else becomes so much easier. By doing this work, you can then elevate yourself to the next level and step into your confidence, into who you are and who you are being as an author. Pitching to various industry people within publishing can all be scary in and of themselves. But doing this author story work will help you to more confidently approach all of these challenges.